It's like I'm here feeling all this self doubt. If I do all this work, there's going to be a demarcation. I will cross that and I would be in the la la land of no self doubt and I will feel very confident. And when it wasn't happening and it still hasn't happened, I would say, what is wrong with me? Everybody is confident and I am not. I am doing this wrong. And what I've learned to realize that question is it's a waste of time to ask that question.
In this episode of the Creative Debrief, I sit down with Deepshikha Sairam, writer, podcast host, and coach. And she and I talk a little bit about her journey through burnout and the tools that she used to get through that. We also talk about how she arrived at the decision to pursue her lifelong dream of writing. Well, hello, everybody. I am here with Deepshikha Sairam. Did I say that right?
You did.
Perfect. Deepshikha and I met a few weeks ago and had a wonderful conversation, and she shared a little bit of her story, and I just really wanted to give her the opportunity to do that here as well. It's very inspiring and motivating, and I just left our conversation with all kinds of fuzzy, warm feelings and feeling very inspired myself. So, Deepshikha, I would love for you to take a few minutes to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Emily, for having me here. And it's been such a pleasure knowing you. I was thinking about, this conversation today in the morning of, doing this with you. And I was like, wow, like I just met her a few weeks ago. And I just love how that happens, um, using online connections. So I won't go into my full story because that would take up the whole time, but I will just tell you a little bit about who I am. My name is Deepshikha. I'm a writer, and I love words. I love the impact that words can have, and I feel like I've always been a writer. In my heart, this is something that I've been not doing, but like thinking about doing ever since I was 9 years old. Before this, I had a business. Before that, I was working at a corporate, in corporate, and one common thread that I could see all my life was that I always wanted to write. So, a couple of years ago, I gave myself that permission to go fully into writing. I'm also on the verge of creating workshops for writers. My background is into learning and development and facilitation. And my hope is to create a way for writers to get unstuck in their writing, stop procrastinating, and really tap into the flow of that creative mind that we all have so that they can write freely and they can write more. Um, and the way that I have learned how to do this, and I do this, is through really a lot of nervous system regulation work. Because when I would write, and I would write a lot about my personal stories, they would often put me in a high stress response that I would be unable to write. I would go into freeze for weeks and I would not be able to write. So I went through this entire process of learning how the nervous system works. And we can get into that. It's called polyvagal theory. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is the gift for writers. And the more I talked to writers, the more I understood that writers wanted to really understand how can they do it in a very embodied way and how can they write in a way they feel safe and their writing doesn't harm them. They're not cowering under their blankets for days at end. So my hope is that we can create these workshops and these retreats and these gatherings for writers all around the world where we can come together and write in a safe environment, so that they can fully use the potential of their biological potential and the potential of their human brain.
That is so cool. Can you tell me a little bit more about, and I don't remember the word that you used or the phrase to describe it, but
Yeah.
a bit more about that?
Right. So, I mean, of course, there's a lot that goes into it, but one of the things that has really inspired me is the polyvagal theory. It was something that came into being by psychotherapist called Dr. Stephen Porges, and he created polyvagal theory which is basically the science of safety. And it's if you go on Instagram and you search polyvagal theory or vagus nerve, it's like all the rage right now. And this is like what I want to touch upon. Really is about how can we regulate our nervous system so that we're not constantly in a stress response. We're not, in a fight or flight or freeze response. And what are some of the things that we can do to get us in our safety mode, get us in our play mode, so that we are able to be in that flow of creative writing. One of the things that I also learned, and I know that we'll get into it through my previous work, is that we have learned to work, and whether this is corporate, whether this is, for creatives, whether this is people who have their own business, but we have learned to work in a very patriarchal way, which is coming from a factory culture, like very Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And of course, there's no 9 to 5 now. There's like 9 to 9 or even 9 to 11, right? But this mindset of always going, like always hustling and always working, and rest is bad. And that can really put us in a cycle of burnout, which is what happened to me. So one of my journeys the last 3 years has been, actually 4 years now, has been into really understanding how did we do get things done, because art has always been there, creators have always been there. How did we get things done before the patriarchal culture came into being? So I'm talking like 2000 years before, right? And what my research and what my education and what my learning and journey told me was that there is a really feminine way of doing this, which is a very balanced approach of being in touch with your intuition, and making rest as a part of your working cycle, and honoring your body and honoring your emotions. And when I did more of that, I realized that I was kind of detaching myself with these success norms that we normally think that we have to do in order to be successful. So in my case, it was the money, it was the fame, it was, how much money my business was making, how many followers I had on Instagram. All these things were markers of my success. And the more I untangled myself from the patriarchal norms, the more I understood was that those were actually not the success markers that were making me happy or fulfilled. What was making me happy and fulfilled was, learning to understand my body, learning to understand my emotions, giving time for my emotions to be processed, healing some of the trauma that I had in my childhood, giving my body rest, really working from, I use the word heart and brain, and really like letting my heart lead. Like, what do I want to do? And when I did that, the answer was so loud and so clear that I had to write. So it was, of course, a process, and nothing is linear. And it happened through many different iterations of this journey. But the answer that came loud and clear every time was that I had to take a break from my business. I actually had to take a break from making money and just focus on my um, the creative part of my being that was calling to me.
That's so cool. I You said something about well, you said a couple of things that I thought were really interesting, but I was just thinking about what you said about burnout because that's something that I've been focusing on a lot lately too with the conversations I've been having, but how you're nurturing yourself after burnout and how you're getting some of that energy back and the decisions that you made. And I love that you said that your journey is not linear. I think that is so important. So let's talk a little bit about the burnout that you experienced and a little bit more about what you've done to nurture yourself through burnout and heal from that.
Yeah. And my burnout story is not very typical. I had I was a business coach before, and my specialty was high ticket sales and marketing. I used to work with entrepreneurs. Mostly they had some kind of an online model that they used to, either a course or a program or services. So copywriters, branding strategists, coaches. personal stylists. Um, and I used to coach them in their business. And the m- my specialty was marketing and sales, but we always ended up getting into the mindset part because I used to work mainly with women. And what I realized in my journey was that these women were really smart. They were really creative. They knew their shit. And what stopped them was all this load that they were carrying from the society. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I don't deserve success. I don't deserve money. And I realized that as soon as we worked on that, um, the strategies of marketing and sales came easy. That was not the tough part. They knew what to do. They just needed to understand and really believe that they knew what to do. So while I was doing that work, there were so many parallel things happening. It was COVID, first of all, so I think everybody was burnt out. Um, my business had done really well. We were, making multiple six figures a year. And during that time, I started to feeling these feelings of I would say they were like tiny little pecks, like a woodpecker pecking. It was like these tiny feelings of like I don't feel fulfilled anymore. I don't feel like myself anymore. I don't feel motivated anymore. But usually we do this. We're like, shut up. I just need to do what I need to do. And that's what I did for maybe a full year. That's what I did. And usually in my experience and I've spoken to so many women on my podcast and talked to so many women now. Usually what happens is when we ignore those feelings, there comes a breakdown. And my breakdown happened not only in my business where things started falling apart, like launches were failing, but also in my personal health. So my health started failing. I started going through a lot of mental health issues. I started going through a lot of physical health issues. And I did not know I was burnt out at that time. And I thought I was depressed. And I started going through therapy. I really slowed down on how much business I was taking. But this thread of the success, it's like a virus, Emily, inside of us. What success means to us. And to me, success meant I have to get my company to seven figures. Why? I didn't know why. Everybody was telling me that was the thing to do. That's why. I had to like keep working. I couldn't quit. I couldn't take failure as an option. All these like, hardcore things that we've been told, don't take failure, don't quit. And all those things that we've been like drilled down, injected with almost. And so when things started failing in my life, I felt like a failure. I felt really depressed. And this was a 2-year journey, but in the end, in hindsight, everything was happening on top of one another. So I was burnt out. I was also depressed because I had been carrying all that load on my back of unworthiness, of not being good enough, of like I'm a huge people pleaser, in recovery. And perfectionism, all those things were. It was like I call it 100-pound monkey on my back that I was carrying all the time. um, I also understood that I was really anemic at that time. So, one of the side effects of anemia is that you feel depressed, which I did not know. I didn't know at that time. So, there were all these things layered on one top of the another, and everything just blew apart. And my understanding is, I'm also a very spiritual person. So, my understanding is like, how we have the hero's journey, we also have the heroine's journey. It is that when you do not listen to those small little voice from inside that's telling you to stop and pay attention to it and listen to it, it becomes a scream. And that scream comes in the form of a breakdown. It can be a health breakdown, it can be a mental breakdown, it can be a financial breakdown, it can be a relationship breakdown. So, a lot of guests on my podcast ended up divorcing, ended up breaking off with their partners or with their families. Health troubles happened. Something like weird, like an accident happened. And those are really meant for us to say, stop and pay attention. So when this kept happening in my life, there was no way I could avoid it. So I had to stop, pay attention to it, and really listen to really focus on my well being. And that meant that I had to go into therapy. I had to, like, um, adapt all different modalities. And some of them were energetic modalities like breath work, meditation. And some of them were physical modalities like acupuncture and actually going to a physical doctor for the physical pain that I was feeling in my body. So again, it was not a linear journey. It's been such a labyrinth. And the only thing that I kept asking within that journey was, who am I? Like, who is my real self? And what does she want? And I don't think that journey ever ends, Emily. I think we're always in that journey. There's always more to evolve. But I do feel that I have shed a lot of those I've shed a lot of that monkey. Like there's still a tiny bit left, I would say, and it'll always probably be there. It's like become a part of me now. But I've shed a lot of that people pleasing, not enoughness. And I can always go back to it, if something triggers me. But now I have the tools to be able to say that, hmm, no, that part of me is lying. I know who I am now. I am good enough. I hope that answered the question. I went on a total rant.
Oh, absolutely. That is not a problem at all. And it's so cool because there are some things that you touched on that I thought were really important. And I'm just thinking about this from like a designer standpoint because that's my background. Whenever we're you mentioned hustle culture, whenever we're hustling and working to meet whatever, like you said, goal that we have that's just a random arbitrary goal that maybe we've given ourselves because those are society's expectations and how hard we work towards those and we don't listen because we haven't been trained to hear our bodies tell us, our minds, our spirits, whatever, tell us that, hey, it's time to take a break and slow down a little bit and maybe set healthier boundaries. And I love that what you're saying is now you have the tools to deal with it and I think recognize it. And I think that's so important, especially as professionals and creatives. I think that it's really easy to miss those signals and so, I just think it's really great that we're talking about that right now because it's just so important. So yeah, that was really nice. Thank you.
Worries.
So okay, we touched a little bit on burnout. We've touched a little bit on your background and all that good stuff. You talked a little bit about self-doubt, and that's something that I like to talk about a lot because I think that and you and I have talked about this already before just between the 2 of us, but, I think that self-doubt and imposter syndrome is incredibly prevalent in everything we do, whether you're a man or a woman. I think that it's a very real thing, and at the end of the day, it's important for us to remember that we are all human and we all deal with it no matter the level of success or perceived success. So tell us a little bit more about your journey through overcoming self-doubt or how you may still deal with that today because we've talked about this before, but I definitely perceive you as being very successful and, on top of things. And but I think what you're saying is that you still deal with that. So it's just
Yeah.
for us to hear your experience with it too.
Yeah, I would be lying if I say that I don't deal with that. And I think self doubt and feeling that imposter syndrome is it's a very healthy boundary. Like we can become really brazen if we don't feel self doubt. Right? I could like I mean I actually I'm a little scared of people who say they don't feel self-doubt and who do not have imposter syndrome. First of all, I'm like, I think you're lying. And secondly, I'm scared of what you might do if you don't have imposter syndrome. As you talk about this, that someone who doesn't have imposter syndrome also probably might be someone who doesn't have a lot of integrity. I think our imposter syndrome and our self-doubt can keep us in check. The problem is when it pulls us down from the things that we really want to do. And then it's just a waste of time. It's just a waste of time to do that. One of the things, and I will be very honest, when I started this journey, there were a lot of self help books that I read, and there were a lot of self help gurus that I follow. And what I took, and even though explicitly nobody was saying that, and some people might be, but what I understood was there is a moment and there is a phase in my life where I would not feel self doubt. It's like I'm here feeling all this self doubt. If I do all this work, there's going to be a demarcation. I will cross that and I would be in the la la land of no self doubt and I will feel very confident. And when it wasn't happening and it still hasn't happened, I would say, what is wrong with me? Everybody is confident and I am not. I am doing this wrong. And what learned to realize that that question is it's a waste of time to ask that question. I think if we can flip that question and just say, like, there is nothing wrong with me. I had to run an errand at the bank. So I went to the bank. I was feeling really happy. I pulled out of the parking lot and I saw this truck in front of me and it had a sticker which was about what's going on in Israel and Palestinian and all of that. And that made me really, really sad because it was something about like babies. It made me so sad. And I was like, wow, Deepshika, you were so happy 1 second and you were so sad now. And the beauty of the human experience is that we can hold two emotions at the same time. And you can have self doubt, but you can still be creative. You can still go and do things in your life. It's kind of like being a mom, right? You're always doubting yourself as a mom when you have a little baby. You still continue to feed the baby. You still continue to look after the baby. So I think I feel self doubt every day. I have tools. B, I have a really good therapist. C, I I am able to hold both emotions. I'm able to say that, yeah, I feel self doubt, but I still think that I want to write. I still, I'm not willing to give this up.
Hmm. I think that what you're talking about a little bit sounds like is, and maybe this is just a way to frame this, but, um, taking well, acknowledging that little voice that lives inside of you and making the choice or understanding that that doesn't define you, right? It's a thought, not a choice, and making the choice to recognize it, understand what it is, and then move on from that. Still make the choice and do the thing that you want to do. And I think we're kind of getting into this, but understanding the reason why or the reason why behind what it is that you want to do. Like you understand why or your purpose and what drives you. And I think it's really important to have that thing that is very important to you that drives you. It's like your mission, your purpose, your why. And I think it's really important to be able to understand that about yourself. And I think if you don't understand it right now, it's never too late to seek that out because that's going to help you make probably better decisions for yourself throughout your life, whether it's personally or professionally. But yeah, I think that all of that is just this big soup of things that kinda works together that helps you get through that. And I'm very curious, we talked a little bit about, or I guess you hinted at your writing and why you keep coming back to it, but can you tell us a little bit about how you maybe you have touched on this already, so I apologize if you can, but tell us a little bit more about, how you arrived at the decision to become a writer. What was your inspiration and sort of what's the purpose or the reason behind your writing and what keeps you coming back to it?
Yeah, I don't think I can fully answer that question. I was 9 years old. I was home from school. I had a ear infection, like a double ear infection, and I remember being in so much pain. And I stole a copy of Alice in Wonderland from my sister. It wasn't supposed to be my grade level, but I stole it. I love to read. And I started reading it. And I was so mesmerized by the story of Alice that I forgot about my ear pain.
Hmm.
I I was not in pain. I was totally it's like, that stage when you are in a beautiful meditation when you lose sense of time and space in your body. It was like that for me. And I remember thinking, wow, like words can do this? Like a story can do this? Like they can make me forget a physical pain. Like I know I have an ear infection. I know my ears are paining, but I totally forgot about it for the duration of the time that I was reading. And I think that was the day I clearly remember completely falling in love with words and stories. And I was a huge reader all my life, but I never really thought that I could write. I never like that thought that option wasn't available. Like nobody told me that I could be a writer. I thought that was for my dog is barking. I don't know if you can hear him or not.
I think most of us are used to dogs barking in the
Oh,
background at point now that it's 2024 and we've all been through COVID. You're good.
okay, great. So, I didn't think that I would write, and I was working with Bank of America back in India. I was still in India. I was married. So 9 till like I was what 24 years old at that time. And that was when and I don't know how that happened, but I was like, I want to write a book. And I quit my job at Bank of America to write a book. But like I think within a couple of months we moved to the US and I kept writing that book. There was a novel, there was a plot that I was writing. And I had no education. I didn't know how to write a novel. I didn't know anything about it. But I remember I would go to the library. We used to live in New Jersey at that time, in Morristown, New Jersey. Um, I would go to the library every day and I would write. And then, this, like, 1 year passed, and I got pregnant with my first one, and the book was forgotten, and then I got my second one, and the book was even more forgotten, and then I started my business, and while I would say that I was always writing in the background, like, I was always creating content for my clients, for myself, I wasn't really focused on writing a book. So, you know how I think that the thread of your purpose or like thing that you really call to do, if we go back to our childhood, you can always see that thread when it started. I have done this exercise with so many of my clients, and we always take them back to when they were 6 and 7 in that really playful stage when the world still hasn't changed you. The world still hasn't told you who you should be. That's the time when we really have this inkling, like you know, they're friends of mine who were really into food, like they would be cooking things from like rose petals. They were friends of mine who were designers who love to paint. There's always a thread, but then we forget. And the world tells us that we have to go to college and we have to do this and that. But that thread is still there. And I'm not saying that has to be the thing that makes you money. That doesn't have to be a career. I know plenty of people who work a day job and in the night they write their novel, right? So I feel like there there was that moment when I fell in love with words and stories when I saw the power of that in my own life. But I feel like that writing um thought or that writing thread or the madness was always there. And whenever I would write, people would tell me, "Oh, you're great. Like, you should write a book. You should write a book." Um, so I was like, "Okay, I finally am gonna."
And then you went for it.
Yes, I did go for it. That
I feel like your decision, and this is just based on a conversation that we've had previously, but your decision was very intentional. And maybe it was like a marriage of intentionality and just happenstance, but it seems like you were like, all right, I'm going to do this. And I have a lot of respect for people who say, okay, here is this thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to go for it. We're just going to make this happen. You're taking a giant leap of faith when you do something like that. And I think it does take a lot of guts. And it's very inspiring whenever people have a story like that that they can tell, even if you're still on that journey, which I think you are still on that journey. This I mean, being a creative means that you're in a lifelong journey of making things and
100%.
creative things, so
100%. And I mean, yeah, I would like to think that it does take a lot of courage to say that I'm going to go the unconventional path and I'm finally going to do what I am going to do. I somehow don't feel like that. And, maybe people will relate to it, but it's like, there's a saying that I heard that what you're meant to do, if you don't do it, it'll kill you. and I feel like not doing it was killing me.
Mm,
Um, and now that I'm doing it, I'm really happy.
yeah.
So, and who knows the future? Who knows where this is gonna lead? I have no way of knowing what's gonna happen. Just like I had no way of knowing I would be sitting here with you and talking about this. No, this was not in my plan. Um, so I've learned to like throw the plan out of the window and just focus on, oh my God, like what does make me happy? Because this is like we have one life. And creativity and what you're doing, Emily, with this whole debrief and the series is so amazing because creativity is not a part of a few people's life. It's not something that is only accessible to a few. Creativity is accessible to everyone. Everyone is creative. We just haven't learned to tap into that part of us. A lot many of us. I mean, I feel like everyone is a writer. Everyone is an artist. There is a creative gene in everybody. We are creative people.
Well, everybody has a story to tell, and I think, that's what you were getting at earlier is that you had a story to tell, and for you, telling a story is a really important process, and I think a very enjoyable process, and, I think sounds like also there's a lot of power in that, and I think that's true for everybody or everybody sees that, we all enjoy stories. That's what brings us together. It's how we connect. And I think that is one of the beautiful things about writing and copywriting and advertising and marketing and all of the things that we dabble in and work in. And I think that it like you said, I'm getting a little bit off track, but like you said, everybody has this creative part of them, they just haven't tapped into it, and I think also maybe our culture doesn't recognize creative things for what they are too, because, let's just say engineers, for example, aren't seen as very creative people, but what they do is design things and solve problems all day. And it's exactly what designers and marketers and business people do. It's the same thing. You create things and you make really intentional strategic decisions with what you do. And, so I think that's a really fascinating conversation. So as we get to the end of our conversation, I did want to, leave a couple minutes for a couple things here. I wanna give us a chance to if you had something that you wanted to share with other creatives who are struggling, what would that be? And then, after that, we'll give you a chance to talk about what you're working on. So
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I like this work of regulating my nervous system, Emily, has been life changing. So, and we all know that, we have a state of being where we are in a play mode. Like, we feel safe and social. And then we have, like, our bodies are meant to go in a stress response of flight, fight, or freeze, right? That's how our bodies are made. Now, in millions of years ago or thousands of years ago, this was a defense mechanism that if a saber-toothed tiger comes out at us, we are able to preserve, we're able to evolve, we're able to sustain ourselves, right? However, the saber-tooth tiger is not there, but we have the regular stresses of everyday life and stresses all around us. Our jobs are stressful. Raising children is stressful. If you've had a traumatic event happen in your life, if you're writing about that, especially for writers, writing about that is stressful. For me, writing about that was almost very therapeutic,
mm,
but editing that was something that put me in a stress response again and again and again and again. Like I would edit it, I would write it, I was reliving the memory, and I would go into my freeze response. I would become like a 7-year-old girl. And so if we and also like, our when you are stressed, like think about it, if a tiger is coming at you, that is not the time to plan a kitchen renovation. That is not a time to plan your next piece of art. That's not the time to plot your next big American novel. That's the time to run for your life. That's the time to hide. That's the time to fight, right? So our physiology is not made to be creative when we are in a stress response, but our physiology is made to bring us back to the safe and social state so that we can reproduce, so that we can create, literally procreate. That's how we were made. So the what I would encourage every artist to really learn, understand about their nervous system. This is so basic, but like we don't pay so much attention to it. And understand how can they come back to that safe and social state, how where they have access to the creative parts that how sometimes creatives, I'm sure you have might have experiences too, we do our work and sometimes it just doesn't come across. There's so much resistance, there's so much garbage coming out, and we're like, this is not it. And we struggle to make art. But sometimes we are in such a state of flow, it almost feels like we didn't do this. We didn't create this. We didn't create this art. We didn't write this piece. We didn't create that music. Something through us did that. That's the space. And imagine what can happen if you're in that space again and again and again and again. And if you have tools available to tap into that state again and again. So that's probably my biggest advice would be to all creatives that really understand that A, it's not your fault. It's this is how we're meant to be. But also there are tools available that we can get into that zone of flow and play and creativity. Second, I would love anyone to check out my podcast. I write on Substack. So if you are curious about my writing, check it out there. Like I mentioned, I am so passionate about the creative journey, especially for writers, but all artists. Um, I'm going to be starting these workshops. We have a couple of writing groups already in place, but I'm going to be starting these workshops on a slightly bigger scale than we have right now, where we invite especially writers to come in and open to all artists and experience what it can look like and understand how their nervous system responds and come back into that zone of genius where they can be in that creative flow. So if you follow me on my Substack, if you follow the podcast, then you will know when the next dates of workshops are coming up and you can come join us, try them out.
Awesome, and I'll make sure to link all that stuff below more in the information, so for anyone who's interested, that information will be listed below, and Deepshikha, it has been wonderful talking to you today, as always. It's just always such a joy, and thank you so much for joining me and, inspiring other creatives. That's what we do here, and I just appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much for having me and for giving me a platform and an opportunity to share my story, Emily. This is so good.
Of course, of course.